You're tuned into the deep dive because, well, you want to get straight to the point on interesting stuff, right? You're looking for those aha moments without getting totally swamped in details. So today, we're diving into something pretty fascinating. Countries known for having really strict laws.
And we're using an article you shared from 10 Most Today as our guide. It lists 10 countries with, let's say, notably stringent legal systems.
Exactly. And our mission here isn't just to list off restrictive places. We want to dig into, the why, what are the philosophies behind it, what are some surprising aspects, and what does it actually mean for people living there or even for visitors? Okay, let's get into it. First up, Equatorial Guinea. Sounds like information itself is heavily restricted there.
It really does. What jumps out immediately is this, well, discouragement of reading and writing.
Yeah.
The article explicitly says that. And get this, no newsstands, no bookstores.
No bookstores. Wow. Why would a government actively discourage that?
Well, one thought is it's about controlling the narrative,
Yeah.
limiting exposure to different ideas. If people have less access to diverse information, it might be easier to maintain one specific viewpoint.
That's a chilling thought. It's not just controlling the information available, but almost the desire for information. And it makes sense when you hear the president, who's been in power since, 1973? He directly controls radio and TV.
It's a completely centralized system,
Hmm.
and it seems tied to shaping both how citizens see things internally and how the country is perceived externally. Look at the restrictions on foreigners. They can't portray poverty, can't film certain things. It's about image management, big time.
Right. Curating a very specific image. It's hard to imagine daily life when picking up a newspaper isn't even an option.
Okay, let's shift to Saudi Arabia. Here, the connection between law, tradition, and religion feels really, really strong.
That's the key takeaway. Absolutely. The article emphasizes how deeply intertwined those three are. You see it very clearly in the social laws, especially those concerning women. Yeah, the dress code needing formal attire in public, and the rule about women needing a male relative when they go out. These aren't just customs, they're enforced rules, reflecting a specific societal structure.
Exactly. And it extends beyond personal conduct. The government closely monitors media, internet access is limited, and there are serious consequences for editors if they publish anything critical of the administration.
So again, that theme of information control pops up like in Equatorial Guinea. But here, the justification or the basis seems more rooted in specific religious and cultural interpretations.
Different routes, similar outcome in terms of a tightly controlled information space.
Okay, let's look at Iran now. The article states its governance is fundamentally based on Sharia law.
Yes, Sharia law, drawn from Islamic religious texts, is the bedrock of their legal system. And this translates into quite a few restrictions in daily life. For example, any propaganda against the government is forbidden. Even slightly negative comments can cause trouble.
And digitally. You might think there's more freedom online, but no. Major platforms blocked Google, YouTube, Facebook. That cuts off a lot of perspectives.
Precisely. And the rules extend to how people look. There are specific guidelines for men's hairstyles, based on Islamic prescription. And for women, the hijab is mandatory. And things like skinny jeans are frowned upon, legally speaking.
Yeah.
Personal appearance is definitely regulated.
Culturally, too, right? The ban on Western music, rap, jazz, rock, and a total ban on alcohol for everyone. It really paints a picture of a society actively shaping its cultural environment according to its legal and religious framework.
It really makes you ponder the relationship between these legal codes, the cultural norms they create or enforce, and individual freedom. How does living in such a regulated environment shape people over generations?
Definitely something to think about. Okay, North Korea. The article calls it a purely communist state. That term itself suggests extreme control.
It does. Purely communist here implies almost complete state control over everything. Economy, personal life, you name it. The fact that tourists get assigned minders is a really stark example.
Minders. To watch them.
Yeah, to ensure they follow the rules, don't say anything against the government, don't interact in unapproved ways. It's about controlling the visitor experience completely.
Like a tightly managed performance for outsiders? And for citizens, it sounds even more intense.
Oh, absolutely. Total government monopoly on media, radio, print, TV, severe censorship, internet. Basically only for the ruling elite, and even their activity is monitored. For most people, it's an information vacuum.
Wow. And it goes beyond information, doesn't it? The article mentions controls on movement.
Yes, controls on basic movement and behavior. Loitering is apparently banned. You need a valid reason for your activities. Even relationships are policed. There's mention of a dating police to enforce the ban on sex outside marriage. It's controlled down to a very granular level.
Even fashion. Women can't wear pants. Men have mandatory haircuts. That's micromanagement on a national scale.
And the penalty for breaking these rules isn't trivial. The article mentions forced labor.
Forced labor. That shows how seriously these rules are enforced. It's a system built on severe consequences to maintain that absolute control.
It appears so. It's a system where deviation is clearly not tolerated.
Okay, let's turn to Eritrea, another place where information flow is tightly managed.
Yes. Very similar themes. The president has direct control over news content and writers. Everything needs pre-approval before broadcast or publication.
But Eritrea adds another layer, right? Control over religion.
That's right. Public worship is restricted. You have to be part of a specific, government-approved religious sect to worship openly. That's a major restriction on religious freedom.
It really highlights how some states see controlling belief systems alongside information as crucial for maintaining authority.
And perhaps their definition of social cohesion.
Next is Syria. And here, the context of ongoing conflict is unavoidable, isn't it?
Absolutely critical. You have to understand the strict laws within the context of the violent conflict between the government and rebel forces. Things like communication blackouts, cutting off internet, mobile, landlines, are likely tactics to suppress opposition and manage information during wartime.
And banning foreign journalists, punishing local ones who report critically. It creates an information bubble, making it incredibly hard to know what's really happening.
It certainly makes objective reporting extremely difficult. It also raises the question of how conflict itself can become a justification, rightly or wrongly, for increasing state control and limiting freedoms in the name of security.
Moving to Cuba. This one's interesting because, as the article notes, it's a popular tourist spot, but still a communist nation.
That contrast is quite striking. It welcomes tourists, yet maintains very firm state control internally. Speaking against the government isn't taken lightly, and internet use is closely monitored.
The article mentions writers being arrested for posting anti-government stuff online. It seems like a balancing act, wanting tourist money, but needing to keep political control.
It does suggest that tension. And the cultural rules are interesting, too. Alcohol is okay, apparently, but reggaeton music is banned.
Really? Raygun.
That's what the source suggests. It points to a selective approach to cultural expression, targeting specific forms deemed maybe undesirable or disruptive.
Okay, now Japan. This feels different. The article links its strictness more to historical factors, like the feudal system.
That's the argument presented, yes, that the strong emphasis on hierarchy, respect for authority, following norms in workplaces, schools, socially, has roots in that feudal past.
And you see it in the famous work culture, right? The incredibly high expectations, the demand for performance. It reflects that discipline and collective focus.
Definitely. But what's interesting in terms of control is the mentioned prohibition on discussing certain historical events openly, specifically the Nagasaki and Hiroshima bombings and Japan's broader role in World War II.
So, a kind of societal pressure or rule against revisiting certain parts of history. That suggests a deliberate shaping of national memory.
It certainly raises questions about how societies choose to remember or not remember difficult parts of their past.
Let's go to Singapore next. Here, the strictness seems less about ideology and more about meticulous order.
That's a good way to put it. Despite being small, the enforcement of rules is exceptionally high for everyone, locals and tourists. Think big fines for spitting, smoking in the wrong place. The article even mentions potential jail time for inappropriate dress. It's very rules-driven.
A kind of zero-tolerance approach to public behavior.
Seems like it. And interestingly, the article connects this strict adherence to rules with Singapore's economic success and high living standards. It prompts you to wonder about that link.
Yeah, is there a direct connection? Does that level of enforced order lead to prosperity? Or are they maybe related in other ways? It's that classic debate.
It is. And finally, we land in China.
China. Huge economy, major global player, but still, at its core, a communist state with firm government control.
Exactly. While it has a significant international profile, the article reinforces that, internally, the government maintains a very tight grip. Any serious opposition is dealt with quickly and effectively. They're apparently very efficient at tracing and shutting down anti-government propaganda online.
And there's a specific concern mentioned about Western influence on young people.
Yes, suggesting an ongoing effort to manage the ideological climate and guard against ideas seen as potentially undermining state authority. Media and internet monitoring are key tools here.
And certain topics are off limits for discussion, right? Rebellion reform, especially the 1989 Tiananmen protests.
That really defines the boundaries of acceptable public conversation.
So we've gone through these 10 diverse examples. What's the big picture here? What stands out most to you?
Well, it's the sheer variety of how order is established and maintained. You've got systems rooted deeply in religion and culture, like Saudi Arabia or Iran. Then you have states driven primarily by communist ideology and state power, like North Korea and China. And then places like Singapore, where the focus seems intensely pragmatic order and efficiency through strict rules.
Right. It's not one single story. This deep dive really shows a whole spectrum of governance approaches, each shaped by its own unique history, culture, politics.
Exactly. There's no single blueprint for how societies organize themselves or enforce norms.
And it really forces you to think about that balance or maybe the tension between individual freedom and state control. What's considered normal or necessary in one place might be unthinkable in another.
Which brings us to a final thought for our listeners to chew on. Thinking about all these different ways societies are run, the different levels of personal liberty, what principles do you think are absolutely essential for a society to function well? And maybe more importantly, how might different cultures, with their own histories and values, genuinely prioritize those essential principles in ways that look vastly different from each other?
Yeah, that's a heavy question. No easy answers there, but definitely worth considering as we look at the world around us.